my description, as we are working in the same system. And indeed, this perfectly displayed method can be used in practice in one more case study. Therefore, I would like to present results of chronological study based on the full quantification and the class division method approach. The presented results are extracted from the recorded pottery from Berenike excavational seasons from 2015 to 2022, and from excavations in Sikait from 2021 to 2023. My participation in both projects is a part of the study funded by National Science Center Program Preludium 21. I wish to start by drawing the wider picture of the chronological horizon of the studied sites. The full chronological span of those sites extends from early Ptolemaic to early Islamic period, with the main occupation phases dated to the Roman and late Antique periods. For many years, Roman rule over Eastern Desert from 1st century BC until the beginning of 4th century AD was the main focus and the most important scientific interest of researchers working in this region. Because of the excavations in Berenike, Myos Hormos, Mons Claudianus, and because of specific research over the early Roman pottery, like, for example, Roberta Tomber's study on Myos Hormos material or her research on the EA3 amphorae typology from Eastern Desert, studies on this period are well developed. This, in turn, delivers enough quantity of the typological and contextual evidence to divide sub-phases in the early Roman period. Imported Mediterranean finewares or Western Mediterranean amphorae are helping even more, as many of those types or whole production lines, as for example stamped italic sigillata, changing chronofabrics of the amphorae finewares produced in Africa Proconsularis, or black-fired production line of Eastern Sigillata B, can be precisely dated, sometimes with a precision to few decades. As well, other categories of archaeological finds, as epigraphic and numismatic artifacts, come with aid. Early Roman period is well attested archaeologically in the Eastern Desert. However, after the mid of 4th century AD, in which we face gap in the material culture, the two studied cities, Berenike and Senskis, returns in the archaeological record in the great numbers, especially the late antique pottery material that for both of these sites is absolutely dominating. In the Berenike, out of 39 trenches, late antique material makes 77.7% of total assemblage. From Sikait, late antique pottery dominates as well, making 77.1% of total assemblage. Nevertheless, its huge quantities, late antique pottery and stratigraphy is not yet well understood. Besides of very few structures, the sub-phasing for this period is rather very general and based entirely on the stratigraphic observations. The pottery dating in the previous works of John Hayes and Roberta Tomber was limited to general statements about formerly called late Roman period in between of 4th and 6th century AD. In very few structures, scholars try to distinguish something more indicative as the latest phase of occupation, for example, but without displaying any more precise information. Typology of fine local and imported finewares and amphorae is no longer helpful, as the majority of the cases, the maximum dating range for types spans in between 100 and 150 years. Fabrics are not changing with time much. Pottery deposits used by the ancient people in late antique period contains intrusive early Roman material. Finally, epigraphic finds are more rare and not dated with such precision as in early Roman period. And even coins found in Berenike and Sikait in the late phases are usually reused bronze emissions from 4th century AD, as it is the case, for example, with the coin hoard found in the so-called advanced building in the Sikait that I aim to mention shortly. Therefore, aim of this study is to set up more precisely phasing of the late antique period. It is done by the big pottery analysis I wish to precisely explain right now. For this study, I have analyzed 59,793 pottery fragments from Berenike and 14,348 sherds from Sikait. Material was consistently recorded with use of class division method as an addition to the method explained by Roderick in the previous speech. By class, which is the term made up by Derek Kennett in his Rasselheima publication in 2003, I understand a group of pottery originating from the one origin in the same time, regardless of its category or differentiating fabrics. Clustering material into classes of the same origin and chronological similarity gives a needed perspective of macro observation of mobility of the material that escapes limitation of typology and category division only. In the next step, I pre-selected structures or part of the larger trenches with non-disturbed stratigraphy with a maximally long stratigraphic sequence of late antique occupation. From Berenike, I choose trenches T119, southern internal courtyard of the Temple of the Temple of Isis, T122, late antique trash dump leaning on northern walls of the temple, T135, westernmost courtyard of the temple, and the T138, southern entrance to the temple. Nevertheless, the deposits are contained in one structure, their character differs. T122 and T138 shows stratigraphy characterized by following accumulation of trash disposed in the late antiquity. 119 and T135 contains well-stratified usage and walking layers, especially T135, where the part of the walls showed very fragmented street loss. Second structure taken for the study from Berenike was tetrastylon, two trenches, T117 and 133. And Marta Beitler, who excavated this central crossroad of Decumanus and Cardo in Berenike, provided excellent sequence of non-disturbed loci around 2 columns of monumental structure. From Sikait, I selected architectural remains of so-called advanced building explored during last season. This structure was exceptional because it was completely sealed under the collapsed walls, similar to the guardhouse of Mariola in Siena, very similar context. I mean, the ceiling of the context. What allowed to reconstruct original layers and multiple walking surfaces of production area and perfectly preserved kitchen room. Once again, it was very important for me to diversify type of structures and type of loci to avoid the trap of specific nature of locus that could influence the pottery assemblage. By this, I try to find results as universal, as applicable to other sites in the region as it was possible. With such a setup, my main aim was to crumble into narrower chronological phases late antique period, to find forms that can be indicative for subphases, and most importantly, to inquire frequencies of classes that are fluctuating in the percentage distribution in certain phases. To achieve this, I have studied chronology of each layer using standard dating methodology. I have looked at very single piece that could be attributed to the already known class and type, and independently entered maximum dating of each. In case of cooking, plain and utility material from sites in the Upper Egypt, plain and utility wares, I used a broad comparative study of parallels as it was possible, comparing material from sites in Upper Egypt, Nile Valley, and the Red Sea. From gathered chronological data this way, I have chosen the mode value of Los's chronological dataset. Then, with the help of the reports prepared by the trench supervisors, all already published papers on the structures from Berenike, as for example, this trash dump T122 not tetrastylon, I have marked how firm the dating is for each context using simple scale from 0 to 3. As well, I have noted how disturbed the locus is, what serves a role of additional filter. Heavily disturbed layers were not taken into consideration in this study. Position in the stratigraphic sequence and chronology of types and fabrics lead to distinguishing 3 phases of late antique occupation in Berenike and Sikait. First, end of 4th century and beginning of 5th century AD. 2, the second phase, I'm calling strong 5th century AD, and the third, end of 5th and beginning of 6th century AD. In these 3 phases, we can spot characteristic types and classes that indicates more precise chronology. So, for the end of 4th century and beginning of 5th century, so phase 1, characteristics forms are Northern Levantine Amrite amphorae, single-handled late Roman 3, especially type 1a, type according to Pieris typology, characteristic forms of Aswan plates, an amphorae dated by Gempeler, flat outturned rim Ola cauldrons fired in Nile alluvial clay, or characteristic flaring rim flasks made of lime-rich regional clay. For the strong 5th century, we can spot characteristic types of amphorae as late Roman 1, 1a, as well, according to the typology by Dominic Pioi, Aswan red sleeved bowl of Bailey type C83, and set of Aswan and Nile alluvial kitchenwares. Interestingly, one of the new classes that we first spotted with Roderick and Nicholas in Berenike, so class we called Lirch, lime-rich storage jars, is appearing in a vast majority in the loci dated to this period, to this phase. Supposed origin of those big storage vessels is eastern or southern Arabia coast, but hypothesis needs to be tested by provenance laboratory studies. For the latest phase, so the end of 5th and beginning of the 6th century, the most characteristics are Ayla Aksum amphorae, originating from Aqaba, Nile alluvial and Aswan clay craters, usually with the black painted decoration, alternately plates and basins like a Gempeler type 210C, and selection of specific kitchenware forms. But typology is not enough. I wanted to broaden the firmness and depth of the study and escaped relying with dating on diagnostic sherds only, because diagnostic fragments in Berenike makes only 13.5% of total assemblage and in Sikait 9.5% of total assemblage, which is scarce. And I wanted to include as much pottery into chronological inquiry as it was possible. But as I said on the very beginning, we can, by mean of statistic analysis and the normal distribution analysis, observe the accumulation of classes that bears chronological meaning. Putting it more plainly, with enough pottery analyzed, we can observe the frequency of the pottery coming from one source in the layers dated to certain chronological phases. So from the stratigraphic sequence from Berenike, we've secured dating to all three phases from diagnostics and other archaeological material. I selected both diagnostic and non-diagnostic material and started to test its frequency modulations. I was testing it by performing chi-square test with following hypothesis 0. The distribution of each amphora in cookingware classes in each subphase is the same as for whole LA period. So going into the results, I wish to present the calculation for each subphase, taking into consideration most numerous imported classes. A Cilician late Roman 1, Ephesian late Roman 3, and Ayla Aksum amphorae originating from the Aqaba in the northern Red Sea coast. The fourth group visible in this chart as other displays in the dominating part transport material of Egyptian origin, mainly coming from Nile Valley and Aswan region, plus much less frequent imports from Mediterranean and Indian Ocean, as Roderick showed. There are like singular fragments of the different quite wide range typological horizon of the amphorae coming from the eastern Mediterranean as well as Indian Ocean. You can see here on the first result slide difference between total statistics for the whole Berenike and percentage distribution in late antique phase 1. You can see that in the earliest phase of the late antique, Eastern Mediterranean material is scarce in favor of Nile Valley and Aswan region products. Ayla Aksum amphorae are almost completely absent. Here in the phase 2, we can see drastic shift towards Eastern Mediterranean and specifically Ephesus region. Cilician products are well represented as well. Ayla Aksum amphorae are appearing on the horizon, but in the marginal amounts. However, here in the latest phase 3, Cilician products dominates together with the returning trend for Egyptian products. Ephesian imports decreases in the frequency drastically. Ayla Aksum amphorae are slightly raising into prominence, what fits the observation from elsewhere in the Red Sea, especially Aksum Kingdom, where this type of vessels is most common in the second half of 6th and 7th century AD. For the comparison, I have made similar tests for kitchenwares coming from much smaller assemblage from Sikait. Exploration of advanced building, as I previously mentioned, dished out amazing sealed stratigraphy for phase 1 and 2. Unfortunately, without phase 3, because we think that the advanced building stopped to function in the end, the second half of 5th century. By the end of 5th century, it was out of use. So I try to perform the same analysis to look for the changing trends in kitchenware pottery distribution. But as you can see on those charts, distribution stays almost congruent with the total assemblage spread. Given that only 368 pottery fragments were analyzed, the percentage differences are not spectacular enough to spot any strict change. We can see that supplying with kitchen pottery from Nile Valley and Aswan region was stable between end of 4th century and mid of 5th century AD. We still need to gather more data concerning the latest period in Sikait that extends far into 6th century AD. The only problem is allocating good, undisturbed context. This presented statistical data can lead us to the more speculative part of the speech. Can we see changing distribution pattern in the cities controlled by blemishes? From the frequency perspective, it is evident that yes, we can. In the paper given by myself, Roderick, and Nicholas during last Red Sea conference in Crete that Roderick discussed, we presented how drastically all transport ware distribution pattern shifted from Nile Valley to Eastern Mediterranean between Roman and late Antique period. Here, we can to some extent see similar fluctuations of trend, even though we don't understand well historic and political chronology of Blemian kings or rulers. Even less we know about their economic and political agendas. Nevertheless, with the pottery display that is the trace of everyday economic exchange between Eastern desert cities and surrounding regions, we can build some timeline of changing importation preferences. I wish to follow data gathered by Rodney Ast concerning the timelines of three known Blemian kings, Cabantia, Isemne, and Phonem, and to plot this part into broader historic and economic context. I wish to refer to Matthew Cobb's elaboration on political reality of Blemian rule, titled Who Was in Control of the Red Sea port of Berenike in the late Antique period. And the current state of research allows us to speculate that Blemian kings or war chiefs living in the Berenike in phase 1 and 2 were or independent or semi-independent under the strong economic influence of Byzantine Empire. This can be seen in the statistical distribution of imported pottery. That is increasing percentage of Eastern Mediterranean imports from phase 1 to phase 2, indicating tightening economic and political bonds with Constantinople. Very last note on the Berenike in the ancient sources, in the 6th century AD stele of Aksumite king Ezana, who listed Berenike as a source of allied warships which took part in the invasion to Hadramaut. Is increasing percentage of Cilicia and Akaban amphorae in phase 3, reflecting lowering prominence of Berenike in its last phase of existence? Well, of course, provided pottery data is not enough to state anything decisive yet. I do, however, believe that integrated quantification study of ceramics from Eastern Desert, broadened by the data from Northern Red Sea posts and inland sites in Nile Valley, will allow to understand better and better complex economic situation in the late Antique period in this region. I would like to thank you all, and especially I would like to thank to all the friends who worked with me on the pottery material, especially, but as well to all the team from Berenike and from Sikait. Thank you very much.